A warm greetings to all of you, the viewers of Ambedkar Karwan today. Today we are going to bring you a very special person who has contributed so much for the Zen practices and to develop businesses based on that. Welcome, Dr. Lim. Welcome to the program today. And today, co-leading with me is my very dear friend, my brother Rajesh. Rajesh, warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Mangesh.
So before we start off with listening to our Acharya Nagajiva, who is also a very successful businessman who runs $1 billion multinational company, which has spread over all the continents, I would say, even to Antarctica. He has one customer or two there. So there is no continent that he has not conquered through his business, and his business is very unique. That that aims at bringing the peace and prosperity to millions of people, and he has developed, I would say, one of the very unique business models in the world, which caters to the needs of the people, both their well-beings and also their economic well-beings. So Dr. Lim was, of course, born in Malaysia, but he has been a student of IIT Kharagpur, where he came in 80s, and he studied there, and he finished his civil engineering, and he worked as a civil engineer for some years, and then an insight strike him that he needed to do some kind of a venture into the business, and he started off with a company which sort of started in a very small place, like you can say compare it with a garage and on a rented place, and then in a very short period of time, in a decade, that company exploded into many branches, not only in Malaysia, but also in India, Europe, America, Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia, all over the places. So Dr. Lim is somebody who has sort of created this amazing business with very minimum resources, only his very determined mind, very focused attitude towards work, and the dedication. And the most important thing that strikes us whenever we talk to Dr. Lim or whenever we spend time with him is his simplicity. Having a billionaire dollar company can make one go away from the people, but he is somebody who has been always with the people, and he created a company which is not product centric, it's people centric company. And I have been, Rajesh and I have been traveling with him in South India. So he has been visiting the farmers, the poor localities, the villages, and also trying to see how he can improve the well-being of the people in terms of peace, prosperity, and health, and all those, the holistic sort of a development of a human being. Recently, he has been opening his cards, and he's showing it to the people that whatever he has achieved, he has done it through a very ancient practice that originated from India. And the practice is called, in Pali, the word is Dhyan. In Sanskrit, the word is Dhyana. In Indic languages, the word is Dhyana. And in the Japanese tradition, the word is called Zen. It's most popular, one of the most popular words in the world today. And in the Chinese tradition, it's called Chana. So here is an amazing figure with us today who has, really applied his understanding of the Zen teachings and brought into the world to make the world more peaceful and prosperous. So before I ask a question to dear Dato, I would like to just put a line of introduction for my dear brother here, Rajesh Savera. He is a doctor, and he is a psychologist who has studied various spiritual traditions. And he has been following Dr. Lim for a long time and understanding his vision, putting in practice what Dato has been teaching, and making a lot of things possible. So we have co-leading with me is my very dear brother Rajesh, and we have dear Dato today for this beautiful interaction. So without taking much time, I would like to ask dear Dato a very important question. Dato, how did you come in contact with this beautiful teaching that you have been teaching us for a long time?
So, good morning. Yeah, this Mangesh.
India always greet people good morning because to let everybody feel fresh. Now, coming into this this practice of Zen. Okay, practice of Zen, I mean, it's dealing with this samatha vipassana. Okay, so it is a long story, you know. Actually, I at the age of 10, I read a newspaper. Okay, then it's talking about this reverse counting. Okay, the Zen. Okay, now this in the Zen. Okay, there are a few practice. No, one is the reverse counting. When you count your breathing, so and follow the breathing. So which I started to practice, then I found that it's very useful. So when after I go to study in India, okay, then in India also there is a lot of books and everything, religious book listing. Then eventually I went back to Malaysia, okay. Then I have a detailed study on this Diamond Sutra and also of this Lotus Sutra. You see, when Kumarajiva went to China, he also introduced Zen, you know, to China around 5th century. Okay, so that there are a few sutras that is very important for Zen. One is the Anapana. Okay, this is this Anapana Smriti Sutra, which is about the observation on the breathing. Okay, then secondly is the Dhamma Sutra. This is on the emptiness. Okay, on the emptiness. Then this Lotus Sutra. Okay, now Lotus Sutra is very important. Okay, in the sense that in Zen, what is important practice is that we should not keep on teaching what we wanted to teach. We should teach what ought to be taught. I mean, we should our teaching should depend on the listener, or not depend on us. Okay, so when you wanted to interact with people, okay, you wanted to interact with people, then you must follow their thinking. So this is when I went back to Malaysia, you know. Okay, so that time I started to read into this few sutra. Okay, and of course all these sutra are from India. Yeah, they are from India, and so together with Mangesh and you, and also with this Rajesh, we try to revise back this ancient teaching. Yeah, Mangesh.
Yes, I think that's wonderful, Dato. And can you tell us, like, the kind of business empire that you created, spanning all continents and reaching out to more than 150 countries with your businesses? Like, what are the key elements that you talk about, the Ekanaga, Ekamida? What are those concepts that has really created this very unique company in the world? What are those concepts from the Zen tradition that you picked up and applied in the world?
Yeah.
Business.
Mangesh, in the accent, we use a lot of Sanskrit word, you know. Okay, the motto of the accent, Ekanaga. Ekanaga means one dragon. Okay, dragon is a long being, you know. I mean, the accent started from planting, started then this factory, processing, everything all in one process, no. And this process in Sanskrit we call it Ekanaga. Then Eka Pasar. Pasar means bazaar. It means one market. Okay. Then this Eka Minda. I mean single mind. So all this concept actually is a Zen's concept, you know. Okay. Whatever we do, we must focus our mind. Focus our mind into Eka, into one. This thing. That's why then from the one from this kind of concept, we focus our mind. Okay. Then at the same time, we just adopt, you know, to the market. So let's say we come to India, okay, we become Indianized. We go to Arab, we become Arabicized. We go to Latin America, we become like a Spanish, no. But we follow the market, we follow the nature of the market. That is the important piece of Zen. That is important of Zen. I mean, you must follow the disciple. The disciple follow you, no. These are so from that then we started to expand worldwide. Okay. Today we already have 80 branches in 80 countries. Okay, then one country, one branches can take care of a few countries. So we already expand more than 100 over a country until today. Okay, all these we are practicing this simple philosophy of Eka oneness. Okay, Mangesh.
This is a very beautiful concept that you really brought forth, like Eka Naga, one dragon, Eka Mida, one mind, and Eka Bajar, one market. And you have converted this world divided by the national boundaries into one market. I think this development of a borderless market, the kind of creation of a single community with a single mind, and as you explained, the single, Eka Naga, from the tail of the Naga to the head of the Naga. I think this is very important sort of concept that you have put. But when you talk about one egg, you have been also teaching us very important concept of shunya, that is zero. So how do we migrate from this concept of zero to the concept of one, Dato? Like as a Zen teacher, as an acharya of a Zen tradition, how do you go from this zero to one?
You see, Mangesh, you look fully the teaching of Buddha. Okay, the teaching of Buddha. Buddha asked us to detach, no? Detach everything. Why we must because our mind, our mind is very powerful. Okay, our mind is very powerful. But the problem is that the mind are adulterate, no? It mixed with a lot of impurities, this sort of thing. So the mind is like the gold, like the gold. But unfortunately, the gold are a lot of impurity. There's a lot of stone. There's a lot of mud. There's a lot of debris, no, inside the gold mine. Okay, so that the so-called emptiness is for us to detach from all these things. So by detachment, we are removing the impurity from the mind. After you retake everything, it becomes nil. Okay, this is the nil, means nothing. Then the perfect nothingness means nirvana. This is the highest. That is the highest thing. But we lost nothing, Mangesh, because our consciousness is always there. So no matter how you empty the whole thing, the consciousness is always there. There is the gist of Zen, the plenty of Zen. That's why when we say empty, Mangesh, we are not referring to nihilism, no?
Right,
nihilism,
right.
And where everything is throw away everything, no. And some school, of course, not Buddhist, they encourage people to go to the mountain, to go to the forest, okay, to operate. Then they throw away everything. Then the guru tell you, oh, Mangesh, sell your house, sell your car, and go and join them, And this kind of school is nihilism. This is not our school. It's not our school. So when we empty, actually it's a process for us to detach ourselves from this worry interference, okay, so that our mind can see things clearly. You see the water, okay.
Yeah.
If the water is very turbid, you see nothing, okay. Yeah. So when the water become serene, become clear, okay, then you can see through the water, you can see the face, you can see the stone clearly, and you can see the reflection clearly. Our mind is all like that now. Therefore, we need to empty everything is to mind. Okay, Mangesh.
Dato, that is very beautifully explained. It sets me to ask another question to you. You talked about the power of mind, and the power of mind, is diminished when the mind is cluttered with a lot of destructive emotions, with a lot of distracting thoughts. So, as a Zen teacher, teaching in the Buddhism, what are the methods by which we can empty our mind of these destructive emotions, of these unwavering thoughts, of this, completely draining sort of energies? How do we empty our mind of these destructive emotions and really use that powerful mind that we are all endowed with? So what is your method?
There's one important practice, okay, from this sutra. It's Maha Anapana Smriti Sutra. Smriti is Sanskrit, in this Pali, it means Pali. It means so it means it's a Maha Anapanasati Sutta. If we talk in a Pali. So this sutra is that detachment need to practice. You cannot just simply ask person to detach. There is proper training for detachment. Okay, and this process we call the breath counting. To count the and in our Sunya practice, we use the reverse counting. We count from the number to small number and one breath, one count. Okay, then maybe from 9, we count to 0, or 29 to 0, or 100 to 0. Now, counting is important because this breathing is neutral. No? Breathing is neutral. So when you count, when you do the breath counting, okay, you empty your mind. But your mind keep on disturb you, no? Okay. So if you do not empty your mind, counting will be you forgotten. You'll be quick confused and forgotten. So when you count halfway, your mind are very disturbed. No, that one cannot be cheated on. No.
Right.
So that this one we call reverse counting.
Right.
It's very, very important practice, Mangesh. So with this reverse counting, we already promote for the whole world. No?
Right.
Now, of thousands of this Sunyati, you call them Sunyati, across the world, they already practice daily basis. So I believe, Mangesh, with this promotion of reverse counting and this thing, I think Buddhism one day will be revised back throughout the whole world. Yeah.
Right. I think you really brought in this technique of purifying the mind for the people to really declutter their minds, and sometimes our minds are congested. So I will hand it over to my colleague today, Rajesh Bhai.
So Doctor, I had this question because this session is all about business and Zen, and they are two. If you look at it, one is spirituality, the other is materialistic. Two approaches, and we are trying to bring them together. So if you look at business schools, even today, every business school and every people who become entrepreneurs, they come up with plans, they have procedures in place, they have all strategies in place, then they go out to do business. But yet with everything planned and everything set, with all the investment, yet almost 90% or more people fail in business. Why is it so? With everything, putting in so much effort with planning so that they don't go wrong, why does this happen? Means what is wrong with this approach?
So nothing is wrong. No, Buddha already given the answer 2,500 years ago.
About business?
For business.
Wow.
No, because people ask Buddha, no. Okay, we are the homebound people, no? We are stay in the home. So what should be the criteria to become the elders at home? So Buddha said, in order for you to become an elder at home, you need to have two things. No? First, you must be knowledgeable. It's not only knowledge about the sutra, no, the deities, the science, mathematics, the engineering, everything. You know that knowledge, okay, so that you serve the community. Secondly, you must be rich, no. You must be well off, no. Okay, if you're not rich, no, how to carry out the job, how to carry out the support, and everything. Okay. Now the question is how to become rich.
Right.
The Buddha say the world is not perfect, no. The world is not perfect. So whatever you do, okay. You see, there is a study in America of the venture, no, 80% of venture fail in 3 years' time. I mean, if you do anything in the beginning, you want to do something new, your chances for you to get failed is 80%. Okay, it's very high. Why? The world is not perfect, So we always use the hand to listen. This is what you want for the world. Okay, this is the world presented to you. they do not mess up. They do not mess up. So in that, you try to mess these two together. You try to mess these two together. This is them. Okay, so that the teaching of Buddha is like that, So when you do something, the chances of failure is very high, You fail because the world is not perfect, That's the first rule, First normal truth, you still remember? Okay, the world is not perfect. Because it's not perfect, we suffer, What we want, we couldn't get. What we do not want is imposed on us, Okay, that's why we have this kind of failure and suffering. Okay, this is the first law. Okay, now you understand the world like this, so that when we do the business, we get ready, Okay, we do something. Okay, we expect it. That in our Zen, we do not teach people to win. We teach people to face failure because failure is the mother of success. So from the failure, okay, immediately we know what is wrong. Then we adjust our approach, adjust again. Then we do it again. This is Zen, adjustment. Okay, adjust yourself. Okay, do it again. You do it again. So after some time, you started to get some success. At first, it's a small success. Okay, then you keep on doing, become bigger success, become a big success. Okay, so that there's nothing wrong that you fail in the approach. Now in Zen, we say that two schools, you should not go, One is the nihilism. That's why I say the nihilism, everything is void, everything is now, nothing to do with me, doing good. That's why it's absolutism, You say, we go. Winning is the only thing, So they train you must win, Winning is everything. Don't go for this kind of school. This is absolutism, This is also not Zen. So we are something in between, Madhyamaka, something in between, okay? So that you have to be very careful. When you do anything, okay, so that you don't expect everything in the world is rosy, you expect that the world is not perfect, the world is full of suffering, okay, so that the result may not be what you want. Never mind, okay, adjust the approach again, do it again, never mind, adjust again, do it again, then you become better, more efficient, then eventually you can become very efficient and very, very successful. So those who apply Zen on business, they can achieve a very big business because of this principle. Yeah, Rajesh, yeah?
Yeah, I understand. So basically, Zen is not about only success mantra, not practicing success mantra, but practicing crisis management, not success management, but crisis management. Yeah, and as you said, Doctor, then that means that we are applying the Four Noble Truths. The first part of the Noble Truth, that the world is full of suffering, is also starts with business. The business is full of suffering. Then it goes like that. And then we go with that approach, rather than thinking the world is no suffering, the business is all of success. We go the other way around and we say, yeah, we are going to face challenges. We are going to have these problems. And that means, Doctor, then the other question is, as you say, cause and effect. Then if I'm putting my cause is perfect, everything is perfect, then I need to get the result that I want, right? Why doesn't it happen? Like if I sow the seed, mango, I need to get the mango tree. That's it. But many a times after sowing the mango seed, you don't get the mango tree. Oh, so why does this happen? The cause and effect doesn't work always?
No, it's the same thing now. Let's say now we plant the mango seed, you want to get mango, okay? Yeah. You plant a mango seed, you prepare the ground, you give the fertilizer, you give the water, okay. But there's still many uncertain factors in the world. The world is not perfect, Sometimes the storm comes, sometimes there's no rain, sometimes lack of water, okay. So that when you planted a mango, you don't expect straight away you get the mango, You need to go through some difficulty, some challenges, and you have to overcome the challenges. So after overcome the challenges, this is the way to plant a mango, this is the way to take care of the tree, how I prune the branches, how this thing, then after they get successful, then you can plant more mangoes and get more results. Okay, there is no such thing as perfect cost. Okay, when you say perfect cost, I mean if it's absolutism, cost A perfect, but give you cost result A perfect, no such theory, This is absolutism, Okay, Now this is the cause and effect. Between cause and effect, there are conditions, Cause condition will give you the effect. The main problem is with the condition. Condition may not be perfect, may not be what you want, Okay, so there's no such thing as perfect cause, then you get perfect result, That's absolutism, Okay, we try our best, okay, to put in the cause, okay, because the condition, like now, suddenly the COVID coming in, this is open for it, COVID coming in, many businesses are closed now. In Malaysia, the coffee shop, 2,000 shops is closed now because of lack of business. Who can expect that, That's why the world is not perfect. You must always remember this, there's no such thing as perfect in the beginning. So there's no such thing as perfect cause that I'll get a perfect result. But Rajesh, because it's not perfect, then we can become millionaire, You know why? Because when you plant, okay, when you plant, it may be below expectation. But sometimes it can also above expectation, above expectation. So when it's above expectation, will give you a big success. Okay, so when I started DXN, I never think that DXN can go to 100 countries today, We just step by step overcome, and then keep on expect. Many things are unexpected, So when the world is not perfect, it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, It can be a good thing. But it's not perfect, The result may not be what you want. Sometimes the result is bad. Sometimes the result is good. Okay, and this will give you more opportunity actually. Yeah, Rajesh?
Oh, yeah. I got the answer. I think that makes it very clear that the approach that management schools teach, plan, strategize, then, they are not ready to change. They want to follow what their procedures are. But this approach is exactly opposite. First
No.
act, then your challenges come. Yeah, doctor?
Yeah. Used to see, I always say, I always say the many school, they ask you to set a goal, set a strategy. Okay, then you go for your action. This is the wrong practice. Absolutism. No. Oh, I set a goal to become a millionaire. I set strategy. I do it. I become a millionaire. Hey, the world doesn't no. Okay. So when I was in school, we reward it. Act first. No. Or act first. No. Go action first. Action first. You don't plan too far. No. You think you action first. You see a lot of problem, a lot of challenge. Then you modify your strategy. You modify your strategy. So by modifying this thing, this now, then eventually you get the result. So when you get the result, then you see the route more clearly, then you know where you are going. Okay, so in Zen, we reward the action first, the strategy, then we know where we are going. Yeah, this is a proper way to plan for success. Yeah.
Mangesh, this is Zen management. This
is beautiful.
Reverse. Very well said.
This is very beautiful.
And
so as Dato, we look into the world, and the Zen is looked at something like you have to retire in the caves or go to some remote monastery and practice for years and years, polish your mind all the time. But your approach is like act first. And after the action, learn what are the problems. Then, work on the problems and you settle with the result. And then you reiterate the process again and again and again and again and again and again. So, you are Zen. I will say, Acharya Nagaji was Jain. And the Zen, the concept of Zen that is prevalent in the world today. Do you see any difference in that? Because your Zen happens in the world, happens among the people, happens in the farms, happens in the villages. How does it different from the Jain that that is being romanticized in the world?
There is no different, Mangesh. We also go to retreat, no? Sometimes we also go to the mountain. You must understand. Okay, they are two level of practice. One is the small practice. One is the big practice. Okay, so we go to a quiet place. We sit down. Okay, to regulate our mind and body. Okay, this is the small practice. Okay, then after that, our mind and body becomes serene. Then we must do your duty. You must do your duty. Engage with the society. You cannot stay put the whole life inside the forest. No. You remember or not this Mangesh, this Devadatta? Devadatta?
Yeah,
Devadatta is the cousin of Buddha, and he's one of the best students of Buddha. Eventually, Buddha kicked him out from the Sangha. You know why? Because he is a perfect. He wants three things. He wants Buddha to do three things now. First thing is he wants all the Buddhists to become vegetarian. Buddha said, vegetarian is good, no, but you don't put it into a rule. You don't put it into a rule, no. When you put it into a rule, then people will worship the rule. No. Then he said, okay, as a monk, no, should not wear the good cloth, because sometimes people give good cloth. No, we should get the discarded cloth, cut in and stitch it into this thing. So Buddha said, if you want to do it, okay, you do it, no, but you don't think it into a rule. And third thing that they say that, okay, we should not stay inside the monastery. We should not stay in a good home. We should stay in the cemetery. We should stay inside the forest. Say, you want to stay in the forest, go ahead. You want to stay in the tree, go ahead. But you don't ask everybody to do that, because many people, they have a job to do. They have a duty to do. So Zen, the two level. Okay, one is on the small level. One is on the greater level. The small level is that we manage the mind and body. Okay, place, okay, you manage the mind and body. That is the small thing. Okay, then after that you do your duty. You do your duty. You engage your duty. This is a big practice. So actually, there's no difference in the Zen. It's only the approach. They are small approach and they are big approach. That's all. It's the same. Mangesh, it's the same.
Very, very, very beautifully explained, because that creates that clears a lot of ground, which can create confusions in the minds of the people. That they would idealize Jain as something going away from the society and practicing in the abstract way. But as you explained, the Maha-Zen, that actually being in the world and working with the people, working with the problems, transforming the world. Rajesh and I often talk about these two very beautiful concepts that are so important: that non-differentiation peace, and prosperity.
Yeah.
So, generally these concepts like non-differentiation, peace, and prosperity are considered to be, like in the realm of the social sphere. But you have brought these values into your company, into your business. So can you please tell us about these very three important concepts that you have been teaching all the time?
Yeah. You see, when we come to four noble truths, the first truth is that the world is not perfect at all. There is suffering. How the suffering is coming from? Suffering is coming from differentiation. Differentiation. What do you mean by differentiation? This is mine. This is yours. No, my one I want to grab. No, this okay. Good. This is bad. No, good one I want to push. No. So the problem is that the world is not perfect now. Something good you want, you may not get. Something bad you don't want, it imposed on you. No. The first thing, the differentiation. Second thing about people. No. About people. So we differentiate. No. I'm Malaysian. You are Indian. You are North Indian. You are South Indian. You are Bengali. You are Tamilian. You are European. European is each European, Western. And this kind of suffering, this kind of differentiation always create suffering. Okay. Buddha said that we shall not differentiate, and this is an important practice of Zen. So when we practice Zen, we empty everything. We should not differentiate. We should not differentiate. That's why in DX10, we are telling that those who join the company, there's no Malaysian, there's no Indian, there's no Arabs, there's no Europe or Latino. No. So we only want the people, free people. Okay, we want it to be free instead of. Okay, so that non-differentiation is very important in the practice of Zen.
Doctor, now I want to ask you a question. Okay, now you see, yoga has become yoga. Now, why I'm saying yoga? Because you are talking about union, and I believe union means yoga. And you said it's all about union, mind and body union. So suddenly I had this thought, yoga is also union. And yoga has become a big business now. Yoga has become a business. But I believe it's the other way around. Business should have yoga in it, actually. And that's what I believe Zen is. So what is your take on this concept about business having yoga as a means of getting united with the customers, with the society, with responsibilities? What is your take on yoga as such? Because yoga is a corrupted name now. So we need to be making people very clear that it is not the yoga that you see these beautiful girls or guys they're wearing and doing acrobatics. I don't think that's true yoga.
You see, Rajesh, who is the first one in history to talk about yoga? It's Buddha himself. Okay, the word yoga is from Buddha. Before Buddha, there's no record of yoga. Only those guru, those Baba, they say, 5,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, there's yoga, but there's no proof. No. But in Buddhism, we have the proof. We have Yogacara. We have we have a few sutra on yoga. Okay, a few sutra on yoga, and the yoga is well explained by Buddha. There are three levels of yoga. Actually, the first level is to unite your mind and your body. Okay, to unite your body. This is the small yoga. Okay, small Zen. And after that, you should match yourself, union yourself with your surrounding, with the Dhamma, a phenomena. Okay, so this is a phenomena. This is yourself. You should match yourself. This is a big yoga. Okay, this is a big yoga. Then eventually, your conscious mind, match with the Buddha consciousness. Buddha consciousness also we also call supreme consciousness. Okay, there are three levels. And every one of us can reach the Buddha consciousness. Okay, so let us not to talk too far. Okay, this are two yoga. Okay, unfortunately, over the year, many guru, they add the name, put a lot of name to the yoga, and each one have yoga, and sometimes they have to apply for the IP, they apply for the copyright for the name of the yoga. It's very ridiculous, They put a lot of name, then they dress up like peacock, then they talk like a monkey, monkey, and they acted like a monkey. This is the thing. Yoga become acrobatic, Yoga become acrobatic, No, yoga has nothing to do with acrobatic, You twist your body, there. There's nothing to do with yoga. There's no yoga, no acrobatic. If you want to go to circus, everything is good. This practice is good for you. If you want, you go twist your body here and there. If the wrong twisting is quite harmful to the body, These are the things. So that yoga means the union of the mind and body. Okay, this is what we teach in Zen. So in Zen, you go for meditation, you go for Anapana meditation. Ana means breathe in, Pana means breathe out. This is a thing now. So that this Anapana is exists in all the school of the Buddhists. You observe breathing in and out now. After that, your mind and body will be union. Okay, your mind and body will be union. Okay, so when your mind and body finally union, okay, you become Arhan. Arhan. This all become Arhat. That means you no longer need to come back to the world. But union of mind and body is still a small achievement. Okay, so if you can engage yourself, with the society, with the society, then it become this Pachika or this Pratria, this Pratika Buddha. Okay, this is a great great yoga. Okay, then finally, okay, you can raise your consciousness to match with the Buddha consciousness. Then you become Bodhisattva. That is a very high level. So there are 3 levels, okay, in the practice of yoga. Okay, that is represented by the final achievement is Arhat or Arhan, Pachika Buddha, or this Pratyeka Buddha. Okay, and also Bodhisattva and the Mahasattva. These are the 3 levels. Okay, Rajesh.
Yeah. Mangesh, for you, any question?
I think the question that I would like to ask Dato is about his concept of the pure land, because a lot of Buddhist schools talks about the pure land, and they tell the people that the pure land, after you die, you will be born in the pure land. But as I learned from you that the Buddha's pure land is this very earth itself.
Yeah.
So when we talk about transforming the world for the peace and prosperity and the Zen practices, so can you please throw some light on how, we now as a human beings, we are facing a lot of crises like this COVID virus crisis. Then there is a environmental crisis that's staring at our staring at the humanity. So when we talk about this earth as a pure land, and we are here in the Shakyamuni's pure land, Dato, what is as a Zen teacher, as a Zen acharya, how do you put in place the Zen practices in today's world, which is full of turmoil, uncertainties, and the climate change and so on and so forth? So how do you look at it? How do you deal with it?
Yeah. Mangesh, if you study the teaching of Buddha carefully, okay, you see that there are 2 types of world. One is the celestial world. One is the supreme. There's a celestial abode and the supreme abode. Okay, there's a celestial level and the supreme level. Okay, now in this celestial level, we have emotion, we have craving. So we can do something right, we can do something wrong. Okay, this is celestial. Okay, then many Buddhas, okay, including the Amitabha Buddha, even Sakyamuni himself, okay, even the Maitreya, okay, they created a kind of land we call it pure land. Okay, and in this pure land, okay, there is no man and woman, because you are free to manifest yourself, in
non-differentiation.
Up to you, If you are free man, you're free now. Okay, when you're free, you can express yourself. Okay, you want to express yourself, Mangesh or Dr. Lim or Rajesh, a woman, or to you, and the land are full of crystal, full of diamond, full of pure this thing. So that there's no point for you to fight for money, for this thing everywhere, left and right, these are riches. Okay, so that in Pure Land, the Buddha take away all the factors, all the factors that can create a bad karma, so that you can practice. You can practice Zen, you can practice this thing until you yourself become a Buddha. Okay. Then at the time, the disciple asked Buddha, all the other Buddha get pure land, but your land look very ugly, The land, the full of COVID, full of virus, full of bacteria, full of water. Your land is so ugly, Why your land are very different from other people's land? So the time then Buddha used the thumb, from the leg press on the ground, and immediately everybody see the very different world here. Okay, the world is clean, pure, full of crystal, full of diamond, full of ruby, so beautiful, full of this music. Then the Buddha said, "This is my land." They mean for Sakyamuni, it's very important now. The pure land and the celestial land, they are superimposed together. They are superimposed together. That's why for the practice, you have two choices. Okay, either after you say bye-bye to the world, you go to the pure land of your choice. 90% of the world religion is of this pure land. There is a lot. Okay, there is a good land. You can go there. 90%. This the thing. Then, but there's also another school. There's our school. Okay, we say that since this land is the pure land of Buddha, but why we cannot see it pure? The Buddha said you do not see it pure, but your mind is not pure. No, when your mind is dirty, you see all the world dirty. Okay, that's why some people they keep on saying that other religions are Satan, only religions are good. They are satanic design. But they see everyone is Satan. This thing. So that when your mind are bad, you see everything bad. Okay, so that now in Zen, our practice that you have to detach from all this worry, disturbances, everything. Then you can see this land as a beautiful land. Okay, as a beautiful land, pure land. That is the third rule. Remember, the first rule is that the world full of suffering is not perfect. The second rule, the second rule is that all this suffering is caused by yourself. Nothing to do with moon, nothing to do with sun. This thing. The third thing is that there is a stage where all the suffering is gone. So when you reach nirvana, okay, because when you can reach a perfect nothingness and there is a way to go to there. There's 8 normal paths. This is how we structured the teaching to this thing. That's why Pure Land is a teaching. Pure Land is a teaching. It's a choice of a person. You want to go there, please go. Okay. Those who doesn't want to go there, so we prepared ourselves. Okay. Now we will come back again and again. Now, Mangesh, many people they ask us, why it's so difficult to become Buddha? Actually, it's not difficult to become Buddha. In the Lotus Sutra, okay, a person can become Buddha in the spirit again. We take such a long time to come back again, not because of ourselves, because we wanted to engage ourselves, okay, with many beings, like our brother, sister, everything. So one day, when we become Buddha, we also created our pure land, and all of them will come to our land. All of them come to our land so that we can save everybody together. So that we come back here again and again, and not because it's very difficult to become Buddha, because we wanted to engage ourselves. We want to do our duty, to engage ourselves, to interact with the society. And that is a greater teaching. This is a greater sense. Mangesh?
Rajesh?
Yeah, I wanted to ask because you see, this is even a business talk. So I wanted Zen and business. We are trying to, make use of this talk for that also. So I understand one thing, I've seen people who do business in complete stress. Even today, I'm sure the world, all the businessmen would be in complete stress. But look at Dato, look at Doctor. Today he's sitting and chatting us and giving us all the teachings. So there is something that you do, Doctor, that how do you manage stress? How do you, as a businessman, when you have worries about finance, you are worried about the market, you have the employees, so many things. And for you, I know, how much load you have, but yet whenever I see you, you're as if nothing casual. So what is the secret? Because this secret will help a lot of people who are actually venturing into business, already have business. So that will bring the real essence. So can you share that, Doc?
Yeah. No, Rajesh, this is the main purpose of Zen. This is the main purpose of Zen. I mean, when we practice Zen, we can always reset ourselves. So every day we reset twice, In the morning, we reset ourselves. In the evening, we reset ourselves. So when we reset ourselves, we throw everything away. There's no worry, there's nothing. Okay, this. So since we are able to reset ourselves, okay, every day we can always start anew. Okay, we are always positive. We are always positive of this. So you see, when I put up my story, in this coffee talk, in all the talks now, and you can see that in the early days, it's very difficult, We spend so many years now to step up the first step in business. Take years now, take many years now. But why we can enjoy it, okay? Because in the Zen, you still remember There are 6 practice, no, good practice. Okay, so the first practice that you must practice to give. Okay, then practice that you must observe, you must control your body. You know, if you cannot control your body, how to control your mind? Okay, then what they call the third practice is that you must endure. You must endure. So when the things are no, you must have patience, endurance, no, to endure through the thing. Okay, then many people, when they endure, they observe sila, they become negative, no, they become withdrawn. No, so you exert, no, you exert your effort, no, do your duty, exert, no. This is the fourth, what do you call, the fourth factors. Then after that, you practice samatha. After that, you practice vipassana. Okay, so that's these are the basic training, you know, to become a businessman. Rajesh?
Yeah, so I think, Mangesh, we have a very good module that Doctor has shared with everybody. There's a Shunya module, which we do. It's the most easiest way of practice. I've been doing it. We have been teaching people, and you have seen it's working wonders for people to manage stress, especially in this COVID times. It has helped thousands and thousands of people, you know. So maybe we will teach someday that also.
Yeah, I think that would be a wonderful way to go about when we have a practical session someday, where a lot of our audiences can learn about the actual practices. One of the questions before we end our discussion today is a very personal question, Dato.
Yeah, we have time.
And this question, you know, always pops up in my mind, that you have always talked about, you know, when we look at the world, as Rajesh was saying, that people are depressed, people are, you know, having no hopes, and people are so disappointed with the things. But as we know, you know, as your close friends and colleagues, we know that when you started, you started from nothing.
Yeah,
you started from nothing, and you know, you had no, you know, you had some background, the parental background, but you have seen the extreme poverty, you have seen the extreme crisis in your life, the kind of amount of pressure that you had encountered in your lives is unparalleled, as we know from your life stories and all. So a lot of our audience, Dato, here today, they are similarly struggling with the social systems, they are struggling with the poverty, they are struggling with hopelessness, they are struggling with disappointment, they are struggling with poverty. So Dato, you know, as a Zen teacher and a person who has actually gone there and done it, what will be your message today for the people who are really hopeless, people who wants to start afresh in their life? What could be your message to them, Dato?
Yeah, the message there, the world is not hopeless. The world may not be perfect. Okay, we feel a lot of suffering in the world, but it is not hopeless. Okay, it's not hopeless now. We still have a way, you know, to get away from this. As a Buddhist, no, okay, we have a way, you know, to get rid of all this imperfection. Okay, so now maybe in the future, no, we will revise back the practice of Buddhism, and one of them is one family, one skill. Okay, so every family, they must learn certain skill, you know. Okay, like making tofu, making tempeh, making this soya sauce, so that they can sustain their living. Okay, they can sustain their living. Then secondly, we need to promote the samatha vipassana. Okay, this the practice of anapana. All the Buddhists, not to all the people, not only the Buddhists, to all the people in India and throughout the whole world, so that through this practice now, they can reset themselves. So when they can reset themselves, you know, okay, to extent, you know, they can always face the world with much more positive attitude, you know. So they don't keep on blaming the government, blaming the social system, blaming the heaven and earth. No. So we still look at the second rule. All the suffering is because of your mind. Okay, so you see, whether you suffer, don't suffer. The sun comes from the east, settled at the west. No, it does not care. No, the what you call, whether you're happy, we're not happy. It takes 24 hours to make one round.
Earth doesn't care.
You must understand now. All the suffering make inside your head. Okay, so all the suffering is from your mind. It's from your mind. Buddha make it very clear now. So you are responsible for your suffering. Okay, so all this attachment, this thing, the non-differentiation. Okay, do not keep on blaming left and right. Okay, look at it carefully. Okay, accept it. Okay, then train your mind. So to a great extent, you can manage, the suffering. It doesn't say there's no suffering. Oh, there must be some suffering. No, in this, but we can manage the suffering. We can manage the situation. So one, you can manage it, okay, then there's a method. Okay, there is a method. Okay, so by doing this method, then we can achieve our rule. Okay, the third rule. Okay, and also our salvation. Okay, this is very important. Okay, now with the COVID and everything, everybody complain why this is a thing. Then some people asking why God created this COVID. So many people, they even question on the religion now. Oh, God, all these things, nothing to do with God. Nothing to do with God. Okay. All these things, the world is not perfect. Okay, they can be virus, they can be war, they can be there can be so many things happen in this world. Okay, so we as a Zen practitioner, we look at it, okay, we reach ourselves, okay, we do not keep on blaming people, okay, we just keep our mind, make it calm, okay, we do as much as we can, okay, to manage ourselves to this world, and this is yoga. This is yoga. Yeah, Mangesh?
Yeah. Rajesh?
Yeah, so no, probably my last question to Doctor is that, see, when you say that people are struggling here, they are trying to meet their ends, they are doing everything, and we say basically what happens in India is, it is said it is all your karma, whatever is in your life, it's your destiny. This has been given to you, and that is why. So even if I get a sickness, it is blamed for karma. It is everything the karma. So if it is destiny, if it is my karma, then what can I do? I cannot do anything, right?
This is absolutism.
Again,
it's banned by Buddha. Buddha never explained karma in this way. When you born poor, it's karma. Okay, but if you die poor, no, that is not karma. This is the thing. Okay, karma is law of cause and effect, law of cause and effect. You born in this situation, of course, it's due to your past cause. We agree, we agree. But karma is also a programming program, okay? And we are the own programmer, we can write a program, okay? So when you change the source code, the program also change, okay? This is a thing. So that we come to this world, of course, we due to our past action, there is a lot of condition, there's a lot of result added to us, okay? So I born as a Chinese, you born as an Indian, this karma. We agree, something to do with our past life. We agree. But afterward, afterward, you still stick to all the things. You believe that nothing can change, everything's like that. That is absolutism. And this is a wrong teaching. This is the wrong teaching. Nothing is absolute, Nothing is permanent. Remember, nothing is permanent in this world, and nothing is absolute. Okay, so you say that, okay, with the perfect cause, I must get a perfect result. That is the wrong teaching of law of cause. They're forgetting the what they call the condition in between. So that this is my karma to become poor. Okay, then you have to be poor. You don't need to do everything. So some guru say, okay, sell your house, sell your car, join us. Why are you going to worry about karma? It's already fixed. Enjoy your life. But it's a thing. Okay, so this become a monkey teaching, so that karma, you just imagine, karma is a computer program, and this world, the 3-dimensional, computer screen. Okay, so that whatever happening is due to this program. This programming. This programming is inside our mind, inside our this alaya mind program. Okay, now. Every day you can put in the programming, Every day you can put in the source code, Okay, and this is the purpose of cause and effect. Okay, so today you put a lot of effort into the cause, put a lot of effort, Okay, one day you become prosperous. One day you can become successful. That is the true law of a cause and effect. Okay, so last Friday I just put out a story, Okay, there's one engineer, Okay, he interview. And he failed in all the interview, Okay, he said, I don't believe in the law of karma anymore because I don't take the money from the contractor. Whenever I see newspaper, some people suffering, I always donate money, I do it so well, I do it so good, But when I go to interview, I do not get my job, There's no karma, no. I don't get good karma, no. Then we say, you don't understand karma like that, no. When you plant cucumber, no, how can you expect to get a watermelon? This is not karma, no. So that if you want to go for interview, want to get a job, you prepare for the interview. Okay, so I asked him to prepare for the documentation, everything, and go to interview. Because of documentation, no, he get a job. Okay, so that you don't link your donation to people, you this thing. Karma also another thing, no. You don't say that, okay, Rajesh, I do a lot of good, you know. Okay, I donate a lot of money, you know. Then my son must become champion in the class. Good karma. No such thing, you know. Okay, that means you are planting cucumber and you're expecting watermelon, you know. No such thing, no. So your son wanted to become champion. He had to study well. You have to provide a good study environment. You have to give him enough reference book. Okay, you should teach him well. Get a good teacher for him. Not go and do a lot of good elsewhere. Then expect something good to happen this way. No. This is not a law of karma. It doesn't work that way.
I think that makes it very clear that it's always the effort, and only efforts that you put into things that you want to do will give you results. Yeah, Mangesh, from my side.
I think this is a series of 2 talks, and today we have finished our first talk. Dato, you have this very special ability to simplify things and communicate them so easily to the people that every time I listen to you, I am spellbound with your clarity and the way you communicate the very complex teachings. And it's very rare to have a person like you who has been communicating the teachings of the Buddha so effortlessly, and in I would say in such a worldly language where the things matter. And I think this is very unique sort of a teaching method that you have shared with us, and we are very grateful to you for having joined us today for this program. There are a lot of people who I'm sure are inspired with your talk, and tomorrow we will have another conversation with you on doing business the Zen way. But before we conclude for today, I would like to express my deep gratitude to you for being there as a friend, as a brother, as a Kalyan Mitra, for not only me but for a lot of people throughout the world, and bringing profound changes in the lives of the millions of people. So I just want to express my gratitude to you today for joining us and sharing your experiences with our audience today. And also I would like to say my heartfelt thanks to my dear brother Rajesh, who has been very instrumental in bringing up a lot of beautiful things forward. And I sometimes say that he's a tongue of Dr. Lim, who communicates to larger Indian audiences the thoughts and the mind of Dr. Lim. So I would say thank you and goodbye before we join tomorrow at 5 o'clock. And thank you so much, dear Dato, and thank you so much, Rajesh, for joining in today. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mangesh. Namaste.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.